Hi, I'm Rigger. This is your right, and today we're riding valiantly into battle. Before all that though, be sure to like the video if you like it, share anything else you would like, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and subscribe if you want to see more. Now, originally, I wrote an entire script and recorded it, and got halfway through a big edit, and it sort of fell apart. It was on evolving Weiss's semblance to get to this point I'm about to talk about now, but that does a disservice to this idea, I think. We can actually get there a lot easier, and I can go over it a lot more without all of that. Basically, if you want the quick rundown, I've read way too much into one specific image. This one that has inspired me or given me hope that we shall start something interesting for Weiss coming up in her own little arc. Let me explain. Basically, I hate to say it because everyone loves Weiss, but at the moment, Weiss is kinda boring now. Which is not a huge criticism as you think it is because she's done so much. Like, if you asked me to kill a main team member right now, it'd be Weiss because of all of them she is the most done. Like, her stuff is mostly done. And it's not because I don't like her at all, because I do. It boils down to RWBY is the audience protagonist and has her journey with Salem and everything else. Blake has her family stuff and possibly White Fang stuff coming back and stuff with the Faunus, and a budding relationship to pursue with Yang, and similarly Yang has family stuff and is the other half of that relationship and has stuff with maybe stuff with her parents, etc. I said stuff a lot. But as far as story arcs, it feels like we just sort of finished Weiss's. She has a whole big thing to go through with her family, and yes, there's more to go through if we go back and they talk to Willow or they talk with Winter, but in general, her big steps have been taken. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Satisfied with it or not, it's just kind of how it is. Her and her sister basically made up, and her brother basically made up, and she's toppled her father's empire, and her mother is free, the trajectory of her family name has changed, etc. She's not getting into any romances that are actually in the story that we can see, or at least not so far, hasn't been sparked. She has very few personal demons left to conquer. Her personality has changed a lot over the seasons, we've spent a lot of time with her, and there's been a lot of growth there, and it's the reason she's most people's favourite, but it feels like we've come sort of to the end of it. So far, we've had pretty much more story with Weiss as any one member of the team than anyone else, as far as personal things for just her. So legitimately, it's okay if now she takes a little step back, moves to sort of the back of the line of the group, and we focus on some of the others. She's had about 5 seasons straight of being one of the main people whose story we go into. But just because she might be taking more of a background role among the team, which again isn't a bad thing, she still needs to be doing something. We can't leave her just floundering, and this I think is a really cool something. So if you're a Weiss stan, don't worry, I'm not bad-mouthing her at all, and taking a slight backseat is not a bad thing. The rotation just needs to happen in any show. You gotta cycle through where your focus is. We need to make sure we're sharing the love around with the other characters too, but she can still develop on a minor issue, or improve, or do something that still forwards her character. This all basically boils down to her powers. Weiss's semblance, the Schnee semblance, is a total mess, and that's the truth. So making a video out of that evolved semblance idea was sort of asking for trouble, because I didn't go into it actually trying to evolve a semblance, I was trying to address the issue of her semblance, and that's sort of what I'm doing here, but it would get the wrong idea when people clicked on it, because I'm not trying to actually really evolve it in the way you're thinking. Most people would say she doesn't need more powers, she's already OP, and they're completely right. And that's why I'm not here to say she needs more power, but there is an opportunity for something cool and different here. Basically what I'm suggesting is we address how bad Weiss's track record has been in combat until lately. She has gotten better, but she doesn't have the best track record despite how powerful she should be. And we can tie that into her life, into her training, and into her story arcs, and add on to that some history, and round out the story, plus have it tie into the themes already expressed in her story. If you say that can't be done, I say give me a few minutes. Basically, to start this concept, we need to get over a little hurdle, and that is we need to scrap our sort of preconditioned thoughts on how narrative works. And I know that sounds like a huge thing, but let me explain. This includes myself, because I made the same assumptions probably many did. It's natural steps through the volumes in what we're showing and what we're doing with Weiss. Basically, let's change the base interpretation of how we might see the actions of Winter through Volume 8. Winter had standout moments all through the volume and some in 7, and seeing how amazing she is, working with the team and taking down Ironwood and doing these great things and transitioning so smoothly with all of her powers, this is good. This shows us what Weiss could be. I said that. It's the example of where she's working towards, what she could eventually be, how great that is. One day, Weiss can be this. The ultimate support mage, effortlessly transitioning through abilities and powers to overwhelm the enemy and work with anyone. That makes sense. In most normal cases, I'd say that's fine. But what if we take that concept and sort of chuck it out, and instead apply a different concept, the concept Weiss has brought up repeatedly between her and Winter. that they each have to carve out their own way, that they each have to make their own path, that they are not the same. Weiss has the potential to be this on paper, but not in practice. In practice, she must forge her own way. She said since the beginning of her interactions with her sister that she struggles with what Winter does. Summons and such, it doesn't come easily to her, and it won't, and that was Winter's lesson, that it's a muscle, you need to work on it, that's fair, but it doesn't come naturally to her. It's not where her talent lies. Let's transplant our audience assumptions about the message. The message Winter preaches is that you need to push yourself and learn things that challenge you in order to master your potential. That's true, and she has. To a degree, she definitely has. She's made big achievements and big steps forward working with those powers, and we've seen that along the way, but it hasn't been working for her. So instead, let's push it up against the reality of the situation, which is focusing on those concepts, and her sister's way of doing things hasn't really been working out the best for her in the most part in practice. And instead, she should reevaluate how she approaches her abilities with what she naturally excels at. Not that her weaknesses should be ignored, because you should always improve, but if she wants to excel, she should lean into the things she's good at, lean into her strengths, rather than fight to use what doesn't come as naturally to her. Because that's the thing, if you step right back, there's a natural narrative with Weiss's powers that hold true even if they're there accidentally. Even if RT didn't put this in on purpose, you can read them this way, and that's good enough, because you can change going forward. So, recognizing that and playing into them could be very satisfying across the whole series if you were to watch it back. What am I talking about? Well, basically, Weiss sucks at using her semblance how she plans to, or how she wants to, how she thinks it's supposed to go, to use it like Winter does. Her summons are always too slow and easily destroyed. She's nowhere near commanding all the multiple summons at the same time that Winter has shown she can do, and her more direct attacks with her semblance, like this ice shard throw, have been woeful. They haven't hit anything, whereas Winter's did when she did the same move. However, Weiss does excel elsewhere. As a straight-up swordswoman, she's incredibly competent, especially in dueling. She's always been that. Her innovations and improvisations and creative use of her semblance is better than any of the other Schnees we've seen so far, and her use of dust has helped her companions more than any of her offensive actions in a battle. So play into those strengths, let's read into them, why not? She can still assist, but turn her into more of a direct combatant because for whatever reason, she just does a lot better doing that. Whether that's RT Wright's better doing that, who knows, but we can lean into that and make it part of the narrative now if we want to. And it's fair to say that one of the biggest things we're addressing here really is summons. Weiss's summons have been a bit of a failure of a story. These days, a full body summon really only exists as a way for her or others to fly if need be when she summons the Lancer. And if you want to know why summons aren't used more, the answer is more than likely practical. That adding another element into a battle always makes things harder. It makes it harder on the animators and the choreographers and the planning. Trying to factor it all in, adding another chess piece to the board with its own abilities and limitations and keeping track of where it is and animating it, it's annoying and it takes more work and more animation, etc. Hence, why most of the time, if it fails mid-summon, we just abandon it. That's happened quite a few times, where it does appear on those rare occasions, it's more than likely done off screen. Go check back through 7 and 8, almost all summons appear off screen. Why? Because it saves effort on animating the whole sequence, all the particle effects of them forming, and where the glyphs are, and how long it takes. They just skip over it in a cut. They've been doing it very frequently lately. The only time a summon has really ever been effective for Weiss in combat was locked in a tiny room with one other opponent, and even then it functioned mainly as a distraction and didn't deal any damage. Which also plays into the limitations of a full body being. When you summon the knight, it has to walk around places, it has to run places, it has to get places. That's a limitation on the power, and something you can work around. And it can more easily be destroyed, and it's a big target, and they are not too strong as we've seen. Basically, it comes down to it'd be easier for everyone if summons didn't exist, if they weren't in the show, but they are now, so we can't ignore them, so they have to keep finding excuses not to use them or cutting around them. So for all these issues of factoring them into battles, finding places to summon them, having to cut around the summon sequence, and having them destroyed all the time as a get out jail free, let's turn the whole thing into a story for Weiss instead. If it were me, I'd do it through something we've actually mentioned before, which is the idea of Weiss talking to and learning from her grandfather, if on the island there is indeed a connection to the afterlife. It's not necessary to this idea at all, you can do it without it, but it'd be a very cool way of going about it. Weiss having the opportunity to talk it all over with him, finding her own way and taking the Schnee name in a new direction, everything she's been doing. Hopefully, of course, he'd endorse this and perhaps give her some insight into his own story and give some new perspective on him, perhaps. If you want a truly nice piece of writing, what you would do is then have him be the first real Schnee that she truly connects with. She has a relation to her family, she loves her family, but this is the person in her family that gets her. He's the other Weiss, he's the one like her. He forged out on his own. He built a legend from nothing. He helped the world, and he helped his family. He worked the hardest and faced many challenges. He became a huntsman. He was studying, and he was rigorous in everything he did, and he was driven. And that's exactly who Weiss is. So he supports Weiss 100%. She's actually on his trajectory and finding her own way. And from there, we lead into the idea of Weiss doing what she does best and thinking outside the box, being creative. Her summons are too slow and ineffective, but rather than it just being a thing we see and a get out of jail free, we put it in the show. She realizes this is a weakness and she needs an answer. But that answer has been staring her in the face all along, which is partial summoning. It plays into a logical fallacy. That way, if you could summon something, you would assume summoning all of it is the best. However, that's not what we've seen. Partial summoning is something she already uses, but only in moments of panic. Presumably not to consume as much aura too for fun things like her landings. It's something that happens on the fly. We tie this all together, where Weiss adopts a new fighting style. If you're wondering, I've mentioned before that this island being a training arc for everyone is a little pointless, because RWBY doesn't really work on that kind of system as a show, it's not Dragon Ball. Check out the Hyperbolic Time Island video for a deeper dive on that subject and why. But this is something for Weiss to do while the others are here. Something that's new for her, something different, something useful for the future, and it means she isn't just tagging along, she has her own little story on the island and is different at the other end for her own reasons. Plus, that connection with her grandfather means there's actual continuation of her personal story rather than feeling like it's somewhat done for now and on pause till we get back to everyone else. So it sort of works really nicely all together. But now onto the concept here. It's Weiss utilizing multiple partial summons, rather than multiple full-bodied summons like her sister. This is how we quote-unquote evolve Weiss's semblance, but actually by reverting it. It's evolving, just backwards. So she doesn't get any actual new powers, she's just using what she already has in a new way. This goes beyond the night, however. I think that this shot perfectly encapsulates the message. Weiss starts something amazing here for her. We get this screenshot. This happened in the show, and it lingered on it for just a moment longer than it maybe needed to. And I think that there's a very distant chance this could be an actual hint that this is something they might do in the future, this idea. And this is my guess at it. And the Sentinels spring up from the ground here, destroying and ruining that summon before it's fully formed, a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about. We've also seen things like Weiss ending up in situations and spots where it'd be nice if she could fly more easily, and her only solution is a full summon, which she doesn't have a whole lot of maneuverability on and can't really attack from very well. So I propose this instead. It's an idea that springs not just from this screenshot, but also from this moment, her opening a glyph and summoning ice over this thing's wings. All that together had me thinking. I propose that, just like the Knight's Sword, Weiss can summon just part of all of her summons through glyphs for personal use. These glyphs essentially stick to her. So just like when these glyphs follow the Schnees around on their back, a glyph opens up on Weiss's back and she summons wings. I don't know where she got this Nevermore from, by the way, we don't really address that, but it would be really cool for her to basically have giant ice angel wings. Just the wings come out, not the whole summon, and she can use them as if they were her own. Hence, War Angel Weiss. I couldn't go with Valkyrie Weiss because people would have got sidetracked because of the name. But the concept is solid. Believe it or not, there was a cool nod to this idea in Volume 2, which I think was just an animation choice at the time because notoriously the end fight there was under a lot of time crunch and it just looked cool, but that's fine. We can tie it together anyway, because why not? Weiss swipes her sword and a ghostly ice sword appears for just a moment, giving her much greater range and more power. Do exactly that, but almost all the time when she needs to. I'm talking about, we get to a point where Weiss slashes the air with her sword, and as she does, the giant Knight Sword appears for just a moment in the air and crashes into her target even at a distance. We can say this takes a lot less aura. Even if you don't think it should, you want to debate how aura works, it doesn't actually matter. It's just a justification while she's doing this now. And aura breaks when they need it to for story, it doesn't really matter. just say that the fact she's not maintaining the summon drains her aura a lot less, and therefore that's the reason she's trying this out. But essentially that's the idea. She's a lot stronger than she looks, she has a lot more range than she looks when she swings her sword, because the Night Sword summons and performs the slashes with her. And also she has a personal set of wings she can fly about with. Again, no idea where this Nevermore came from, but for her, even if not, we could use the Lancer and instead give her insect wings, which would turn her from looking like a grand angel into looking like a fairy, which is also just awesome in its own way. And just like a fairy, she can still fly around with Mertnaster and cast glyphs and throw fireballs and everything else. She can still do all those support things, but she can do it in a new way. Also, I know there's differing opinions on her mime skating around on her glyphs, but presumably that uses just as much aura as this would anyway, so it's no different, and maybe people who don't like that animation could get rid of it. I'm sort of neutral on it, but just putting it in there. But we've covered wings and we've covered the sword, but even now there's still one more cool thing you could do, and that is utilizing the Queen Lancer's stinger as a personal weapon. Give Weiss a hook shot. A glyph appears on her hand and the Lancer's ice hook shoots out. Now she is the perfect blend of Sub-Zero and Scorpion. But then also she has a big sword to fight with and block, a hook shot to grab things, and personal wings to fly around with. Weiss could be awesome. She already should dominate in her fights, but she isn't, so make that the story of why isn't she? Maybe she needs to approach how she's doing things differently, because it's just not working for her. Despite all the advantages she should have, she just can't seem to get it working for her. But maybe this idea will, because it's hers. That means for the writing and animators, there's no more worrying about summons on the field. It turns all these fails into a full story of the season of the reason that the summons weren't working for her is because they were never going to. It's not what she was meant to do with them. And it gives one more iconic evolution and completes Weiss's power set into being very useful and tying in things from as early as Volume 2, plus giving her a cool new look we haven't seen before. Of course, none of this takes away her power. She can still summon a full Lancer when they need a bunch of people to fly around on it, but it's still a cool image. And I didn't even take it as far as it could go. If that hookshot idea was applied and you could also do RWBY's favorite thing again and, borrow from other anime, you could turn her into a Titan Slayer. Yep, no gas needed for this one, she just has a personal hookshot and gravity glyphs to zip around with and go all just cause. They loved doing some first-person shots recently too, which I'm a big fan of, and this would make an awesome one, Weiss's POV hookshotting around. Then, when things to hook into run out, she can break out the wings and glide, which presumably would be much slower than hookshotting directly, if you wanted a reason why she wasn't using the wings all the time, and also the wings are a target, you can destroy them, and that's another thing, there's still peril in this. You can destroy them, the summons aren't super strong, that sword perhaps could shatter with enough damage, and she could run out of aura mid-air. You can build tension situationally still, she's still not so OP that it breaks anything more than it already has. Also, as a bonus, it could mean that we think more about other things Weiss takes down in the future. Perhaps if there's an interesting enemy here, she can defeat it, and that gives her one more ability. The sword can be used for defense, but perhaps some kind of shield, something like a giant shell maybe. But honestly, she uses glyphs as shields too, so it's not really necessary, it's just interesting. With a glyph shield in one hand, and a giant ice sword mystically by her hand in the other, and her big ice angel wings, we're talking about Weiss as a Schnee Gabriel, and it's kind of amazing. Okay, Gabriel didn't have a shield, but you get the idea, it's a great image. Even more so when you factor in that the shield in her offhand could then summon a hookshot and fire that out of it instead of working as a shield. Just incredible in terms of potential and style points. The idea of potentially taking down something cool in the future and gaining new abilities is just extra stuff, we don't even have to worry about it, but it's just something to think on. Though, if they want to do a very retro thing and bring back something I want brought back, and she uses the Nevermore wings, this could be really amazing too. No more lobbing ice chunks, Weiss can glide over the battlefield and unleash a hail of icy feathers like the original Nevermores did, which would be a really cool visual as she glides over the top and they fire off from her wings. And it could set us up for something I'd just personally really like to see in the future, which is eventually her and Winter fighting together, her new powers and Winter as a maiden. Imagining it's someone like Cinder, someone strong and a mid-air opponent, and flying around in combat, they circle and swoop down their opponents on each side, Winter using her maiden powers and Weiss on her icy angel's wings, firing her own versions of attacks but in sync, clearly alike each other, yet unique, mirroring each other with their own versions of their powers and skills. Weiss fires the feathers, and Winter fires the birds, etc, etc. It's just a beautiful idea, and despite flying not being covered when they were training, I'm sure, it does harken back to the idea that Winter trained Weiss. She knows how her sister thinks, and vice versa. And they could mirror some sword moves as well and such, showing that they have learned from each other and that they are related and they have this shared history. Finally having them in sync on something and just how effective they are when they both are doing what they do best in their own way. It's just a pretty idea on a narrative level, but it could be pretty in effect too. Because then you can start mixing together the visual effects of these things too. As Weiss flies, the summon wings leave that ghostly vapor, and then as Winter flies through it, her maiden powers leave these icy particle effects to mix. If you made it a standout moment and put the animation into it as a big thing, could look amazing. Oh, and also I'd like to point out, if you want to sell this idea to the audience, you can do it in one scene. If you want to get people on board, I've got it. While they're on the island, and she's thinking about this and trying to learn and trying to plan and trying to get better, the team come across a giant monster attack, or giant animal. Something really big, really dangerous, and they're struggling to beat it. You know, a boss character on the island of some description. Then, let's say, RWBY launches into the air to try and fly down at it and hit it, and in midair she gets hit. She gets knocked out, her aura breaks, and now she's free falling, perhaps even towards the monster's open mouth. She's gonna die. Seeing this, Weiss, of course, leaps into action without thinking. She just goes without a plan, just feeling it, embracing the moment. A more RWBY mentality, a more reactionary idea, just like when she saved Velvet. It's bringing this idea back that when she goes with what comes naturally, things work out better. The others couldn't get there in time. They're all running towards it and looking up, but they can't get there. They're in horror and things go to slow-mo. And then, whoosh, some shard of ice shoots down into the monster's mouth, and it roars back in pain as Weiss streaks through the frame, catching RWBY. As the beast screeches and recoils in the background, Weiss swoops down towards the others and pulls up in a glide to land on her feet. Just as she's coming down, feet first, and the team are watching her, and she has RWBY nestled in her arms with her huge icy Nevermore wings extended out behind her, the golden light of the sunset of the island behind her. RWBY's guardian angel. Let it linger, let the moment hang just for a second, let time slow just a little as they all take in the sight. And then snap back into the fight, they put RWBY down, and then they dive in and they take the thing down, etc., working as a team and flowing very well and get the scene done, and then we'll cover what happened later. Just do that, and no one will complain about this idea. You'll have fan art and poster designs for years. Put some time in and give her a line maybe to say to RWBY, something I don't have right now, just think of something cool for her to say. It's also then a mirror to the Crow scene in Volume 6, but with Crow not here to catch them, her team is. Her teammates catch her this time. And this doesn't have to kick off a ship thing. I know it's very romantic the way I described it, but even if not, it doesn't matter. They love each other anyway. It's just a cool moment of saving someone they love, be it romantic or not. It's just a really cool mirror, and it's also a mirror to Weiss diving in and saving her in the forest right back in Volume 1. Here, it happens again, but look how much they've changed, look how different they are as people. It's just cool. Anyway, if you lasted this long, you get that cool idea if you got this deep into the video, so I hope you liked it. And direct any fan art to my Twitter, please, if you're so inclined, because shipping or not, I'd love to see that image. It's just really cool in my head. I just lack the talent to bring it to life in a satisfying way. But if you do like that image, please share it with me. I'll definitely look at it because I think it's awesome. But if not to worry, it doesn't matter. You can be my guardian angel in another way, which is by throwing a like on this video, because that would actually really, really help. And also, truly, and I mean this, let me know what you think in the comments. Let's talk about it, because I think these ideas are cool. But I'm definitely open to hear what you want to say, because it is kind of a random thought out of nowhere. It is true that this isn't needed. Weiss doesn't need this for her to stay in as a character. She can just stay as is, it's fine. She's had a lot of story, and it's fine for her to move to the back of the line for the team for a while, and share the love around of story time and screen time. But I thought this was a cool way to tie a lot of things together, since even back in Volume 1 and 2, and change things up in a way that actually doesn't change much. It doesn't give her a whole lot of new abilities, really. It just is her rethinking how she uses them already, which is its own kind of evolution, and an evolution, you know, using your brain rather than getting more powerful. Believe me, originally I was trying to work time dilation and stuff into this too. I thought it'd be cool if I could tie in everything she's ever done and make it all work. I thought that's the answer. She can use it to give herself extra fly speed because flying's slow or something. And yeah, perhaps she could. Or I thought about combining into that's how she solves the summoning issue. She uses time dilation first, and then they summon faster. And all that is kinda cool, but the truth is that they just don't seem to want to touch time dilation, so rather than force it, I'll just leave that idea here at the end. Aside from all that, I hope you just like the Angel Weiss idea. I think it's really cool. At the end of the day, it's a unique way to use summons that they don't seem to want to use and are a pain to factor into any scene anyway, because they're not characters that we like. They're just there even if they do go off. So rather than all that, I just thought this was an original way for him to do it that ties into the stories we've been told along the way. Even if by accident they've just been most useful when they're partially there. So let's make that the answer into how to make them more useful. Anyway, with all that said, here's a little tip before you go. If you're ever having trouble remembering where Jacques lives, just keep in mind that he's the Schnee Dust Company president. So of course he lives at the Weiss house. Until next time, my name is RWBY. Hope you have a wonderful day. And I hope I did alright.